Thanks everyone who joined. Before we begin, just want to give a brief on the talk. So I am in no way expert in SQL. However, last several months I've been working with data teams at ASOS, where I gained quite a good knowledge and experience around how to unit test SQL Server and the databases. And I'll be sharing that experience with you in this talk. So just a little bit about me. So I'm Naveen, working as lead Q engineer at ASOS, got just over 8 years of experience. Love Azure and Azure DevOps, and of course testing as well. I love reading books. Read about 15 books last year, trying to beat my own target this year. You can also find me on my blog and LinkedIn and GitHub, where I will be making the code for this talk available. So feel free to get in touch. So before we begin, I just want to recognize that the material that I'll be using in the following slides is the result of a team effort. And one of the members of the team, Neil, is with us today as well. So maybe he can help me answer some of the hardest questions at the end, if there will be any. So just to get an understanding of how familiar the audience is with C# and Specflow, I'll just open the poll. So I really appreciate if you guys can jump onto Slido and vote there. Let me share the screen. The poll is now live. All right, some technical problem. Why am I not seeing answers? That's weird. All right, I had show results disabled. Here we go. Oh, we got quite a few ninjas as well. Great, thanks everyone for answering that. And it looks like majority is somewhat familiar with C# and Specflow, so that will make my demo easy, and I'll breeze through it. So the second one is, are you committing? This question will decide whether you're going to heaven or somewhere else. Are you committing an unforgivable sin of not unit testing your database? And the poll is now live. All right, there we go. All right. All right, I'll just give it a few more seconds to see if anyone else wants to answer. All right, so according to this, majority is in the sin area, and I was in the sin as well. We were committing this sin and weren't testing database, but now we are. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. So let's begin with considering what do we mean by this. So what I'll do is I'll go through all of this theoretical part, and I'm sure most of us are familiar with all these definitions and benefits and things like that. So that I can spend a little bit more time on SQL unit testing and demo itself. Uh, let's quickly look at what do we mean by this thing called unit testing. And if you ask 10 different people, you'll probably get 10 different definition. But there's one definition out there which I kind of like, and it comes from Microsoft, which reads like this. Uh, the primary goal of unit testing is to take the smallest piece of testable code, smallest piece of testable software in the application, isolate it from the remainder of the code, and determine whether it behaves exactly as you expect. The key here is smallest piece of testable software. Now, that can that depends on different people. What do they take? Or what do they understand by smallest piece? So unit testing has become ever more important in the software industry, especially now that we are moving into a DevOps-centric world. And however, SQL programming is generally less likely to be subject to unit testing, but it can often benefit from unit testing. So I can understand why some people answered they're not committing a sin, or it's not relevant, or the code is not a sin, basically. So let's take a look at some of the benefits that we can get out of unit testing. So it helps us answer the question, does it work? Which is the important one. Makes implementation of future changes faster, refactor code with confidence, so protects against future or future regressions that refactoring may introduce into the code. And it can act like a up-to-date documentation for code, and of course the faster feedback. We all are aware of shift left strategies and all those things, and why faster feedback is really important in DevOps world. And it of course enables continuous integration. So when it comes to choosing a tool for SQL unit testing, so there are many growing number. There aren't many growing number of unit testing framework when it comes to SQL testing, and there are certainly few frameworks to choose from as compared to other programming languages. So one of the unit testing framework that is widely used is T-SQL-T. And hence, when I was working with data services team, me and the other colleague, we naturally started with evaluating T-SQL-T, but we also wanted to explore other option. And so we started looking at C# and Specflow as well. So the two main parameters that we considered during the evaluation process was ease of adoption of any tool that we use or introduce to the team. And the criteria within ease of adoption that we measured is licensing cost, ongoing cost, and the support available either within the organization or outside or external community support. And the second parameter that we considered during evaluation was Azure DevOps integration, and what would be the learning curve to learn new programming language if we were to decide or go with a tool that is not currently used in the team or the organization, and what are the requirements that there might be, like a development and test environment, is a version control friendly, and things like that. So the conclusion of this evaluation process was that either T-SQL-T or Specflow both works well, and both can be used. However, T is all in T-SQL, and it's easier to write tests, especially for database people. Whereas Specflow is more integrated with Visual Studio, and a lot of depending on the technological stack of an organization. In our case, a lot of the engineers and QAs were more familiar with Visual Studio, and there was more internal support and expertise available within the organization, and hence we went with C# and Specflow, and that's probably why you're hearing about it from me today. Let's take a look at the difference between a good and bad SQL unit test. Now, again, I adopted these from several documentations available on Microsoft, and these points are true either for both SQL unit tests or any other unit test for that matter. So some of the good things are good characteristics of a unit test is it should be fast, isolated, repeatable, self-checking, and timely. I'm not going to read these things out. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it. However, I will make the slides available if you want to read through them. Just want to pay specific attention to the bad unit test, especially in SQL. So if you're writing a SQL unit test and it depends on actual data, then that's a bad sign, because no SQL unit test, the purpose of SQL unit test is not to verify the data, and hence the test must be separated from data verification test. And another big challenge or bad thing that people normally go down is not following a specific or not having a specific testing pattern in place. The testing patterns help you keep the test simple and easy to understand. And there are several test patterns and strategies available to be followed. And yeah, the naming convention, repeating the setup code, so writing once and reusing it multiple times, all those kind of things. Again, I'll share the slide so you can read through it. So, why this is not working? Next. So now let's take a look at some of the SQL unit testing pattern that you may want to consider or may want to be aware of when embarking upon SQL unit testing journey. So the first one is unit testing a store procedure, where you got some source table and there's a store procedure which consumes those tables and creates a resulting table. So you may want to test that. Unit testing a view. So view is basically a virtual table, and you got many SQL statements within a view. You might want to unit test that it creates the expected view based on the source tables. And the next one is basically the combination of both. There is a store procedure which may depend on or rely on data coming through a source table or a view, and then results in a resulting table. So unit testing is scalar functions. Scalar functions in SQL are user-defined function that takes one or multiple inputs as parameter, but returns only a single value. And in the demo, I'll be showing a function which I'm testing, showing a function that returns a string with capital first letter. So just capitalize the first letter of the string. Unit testing a table valued function, again, as the name states, returns the table. So you got a function which gets the data from a source table, create another table which may be consumed by store procedure. So again, is a combination of several of the previous patterns that I just described. And if you put all of those things together, you get a very complex store procedure which relies on temporary tables, staging tables, and a function. From the looks of it, looks like a table valued function, and relies on another table sources that creates a resulting table. So that's quite a complicated testing pattern for unit testing that you may come across now. So demo time. So what I'll be showing you is I created a SQL database, SQL sample database solution in Visual Studio, and created a test framework to test a function, a view, and the store procedures. Now, for the demo purpose, I kept them very simple. However, these can be scaled to test more complicated views, functions, and store procedures. So if you do decide to use the code, here's what you will need. You'll need a Visual Studio, you need NUnit test adapter and Specflow and for Visual Studio extensions installed. I'm using NUnit, .NET Core 3.1 SDK and runtime, and you need a local DB. I just mentioned SQL Server Management Studio, which you might find handy while trying to design the test and debug the test. This is just a preview of how the solution looks like. So let's move on to the solution. So briefly, let's take a look at the available projects. So I got a SQL sample project here, which got a couple of tables called customer and orders, and it's got a view. This view basically creates a virtual table with orders that are 1 month old, basically. And I got the store procedure. All that does is picks up an order from staging table and processes it and stores it in orders table. Let me close that. And then I got a scalar function to capitalize first letter. This function takes a single parameter and returns the parameter with the first letter capitalized. So that's the database side of things. The next bit is I'll come back to unit test project. I want to run through the framework related projects first. So I got another project called configuration. This is where I'm storing the run settings. So the parameters or the settings used by test while you're running the test. So now you may notice there are two different run settings, one to run the test locally, another one you may want to use with different connection string, when you're running test in a CI pipeline. And there's this class which basically reads the parameters from the strings and make it available to be used across the solution. Now, another thing most of you are familiar with is when you want to run the test and you want Visual Studio to use these run settings, you will need to select the setting file, which you can do by going to test and then select setting file and then just point that to wherever your run setting file is located, which in this case is here under configuration project. If you just double click and it will be selected. The next project I want to talk about is the framework itself, so which has got a couple of folders here. Created a SQL database class, which basically handles all the database operation like inserting, asynchronously executing commands, mocking views, and several other things. And then there are some helper class that helps with the conversions and some of the extension for existing properties. And the last one is unit testing steps, again, which I'll come back to it after unit test. So in the unit test, I got two folders. One is for procedures, where I'm testing our, if you look at this, store procedure, I'm testing process order procedure. And let's take a look into the feature file. So here I got two tests at the moment. The first one is process incoming order and update orders table with latest order. So all that basically doing is, if you look at the process order, store proc, what it does is it looks at the latest order available in the staging order table, and then it looks for the latest order available in the order table, and then it checks if the order in the order table is less than the order ID of the order in the order table is less than the order ID in the staging table. Then it inserts the latest order from staging into the order table. This is quite simple store procedure. And here are a couple of tests for it. So what we want to do is, as we talked about isolation as being a good, as being a sign of a good unit test, we want to start with starting with a clean slate. And hence here in the first given step, I'm making sure that the order table and incoming orders table are empty. And then I'm inserting a date, an entry into staging order. And the next one is when the store procedure is executed, which will take this order and process it and insert it into orders table, which is what we're verifying. So let me run it for you guys. So you go to Test Explorer. So process incoming order. So I'll show you that it actually is not failing for it's not passing falsely. So let me run it, and then I'll show you what happens behind the scene in the database. There we go. It took about 800 milliseconds. And now if I switch to my SQL Server Management Studio, there's this SQL sample database. We look at the table. So what should happen is, if you look at the staging table, so our test entered this row at the beginning of the test, and when store procedure ran, that processed the data and inserted the table into order table. That kind of proves that test works as expected. And the next one I'm just testing that again, starting with empty tables, then adding one entry to the orders table. So an order already exists in the orders, and then adding a couple of orders in staging one. The key point here is the order that already exists in the staging one is also exists in the staging, and one extra order. So when the store procedure is executed, we should see both entries. We should see only two entries instead of three into the resulting orders, because store proc should only take the latest order and insert it into the orders table. Again, as you can see right now, so there are only one entries in both of these tables. So once we're done running the test, the second one, we should have 2 entries in each. Great. So let me execute this. So we got 5745 and 5755, which is what we are expecting. So in the store proc, let me move back. So the next example that I want to show you is testing a function. So in the function, this is basically taking a string as a parameter and converting the first letter to capital. And I'm calling, or I'm using this function within the store procedure. Excuse me. So it is basically used here. So what it's doing is, before inserting orders from staging table to orders table, it capitalize the customer ID, capitalize the first letter of customer ID, which is inherently tested by this test that I shown you before. So if you notice in the test setup, I got all of these customer IDs as lowercase test user, but when I verify, I'm expecting this second order to be with capital test user case, because the first one already exists in database with lowercase, and which is what you will see here. So you got test user with capital T. That proves that the function also works as expected. Now that's a very basic example of function. Can get real complicated as well. And the last thing I want to show you in the demo is testing a view. So here I created a view. All this is doing is, regardless how many orders available in the orders table, it only shows the orders from only from last 1 month. So let's take a look at the test. So what I'm doing is I'm inserting. So again, I'm starting with an empty order table and inserting the test data with 3 orders. Two of them are from within last 1 month, and one is from May. So our resulting table, or the view virtual table, should only have these 2 orders from July and June. So let's run it. That's the view. Run. All right, so paused. If we look at the views, sorry, let me show you the orders table first, just to confirm that there are 3 rows as per our test data setup. And now our view should only have these 2 orders, from one from June and one from July, June and July. That basically tests that our view works. Again, this is a very simple example. However, it proves the concept basically. Now, the last project that I did not talk about was steps. So we are keeping the steps and all the framework related stuff separately, so that in future, if you want to package them and make them available as NuGet package for other teams or to consume within another project, it can be done as well. Reusability basically. In here we got a folder with steps. We got some database steps. These are our step definitions, and got some hooks. So before and after, step argument transformations and all those things. Again, majority of you are familiar with this, so I'm sure you can relate to all of that. And some helper classes as well. So custom assertion. So an unit can only provide so much so for the custom assertion. So that's pretty much it from the demo point of view. And again, I will make this code. It's already on Git versus in private repo right now. What I'll do is I'll make sure it's available. I'll share the link with Ashley, and he will share it out to all of you guys. So thank you for listening in, and if you guys have any question, I'll be happy to answer. Let me take a look at the questions. Ashley, hello.
Yeah, hi Naveen. Yeah, if anyone's got any questions, I think we've obviously got the Slido function open, but if nobody can get through to that and they've got questions, obviously just pop it through to the chat function on Zoom and we'll run through that as well.
All right, so can you not, all right, it's not working.
So it looks like we've got one question on the Zoom chat, if you can see that, Naveen.
Let me try. I actually can't.
Okay, the first one that's come through has just said, why do you have so many projects?
Why do I have so many projects? Like I said, you could have. So the first, okay, let me explain. The first one is SQL database project again, and the next one is next project only contains the tests itself. Again, this was important. So a little bit of a background. The team that we were working with didn't have much experience in C#, and we didn't want to scare them with all the framework bits of it. And as you may be aware, Specflow is quite readable and non-technical people can understand as well. So we wanted to keep that code separate from the actual framework stuff. So we split it out a bit further. I mean, if you wish, you can have all of them in one project as well. Then you got the steps and framework projects. What we wanted was to make it more reusable. We realized the need of other teams maybe wanting to use it, so it's easier if it is split it out to package it and make it available as NuGet package so that anyone can consume. Those were the primary reason for having multiple projects. All right, so I can see the next question, and I can see one question on Slido as well. So I'll pick the Zoom one first, and I'll go to the other one. If you have to run this in CI pipeline, would you suggest spinning up a fresh database and then cleaning up after? I ask because I'm guessing mocking won't be useful here. So yes and no. So we in CI pipeline, you got an option of either running it on an existing dev environment, so you can point to a dev environment. Again, because these tests are isolated, they will clean it up and put the data that it requires and run the test, basically test your code. Cleaning up is done by the framework itself. And some of the more advanced things that we're doing in the actual framework is we are actually mocking a lot of views and tables and things like that wherever we can. But you will need a database to be spin up. Either you can use a Docker container to spin up the database and tear it down, so you don't have to worry about cleaning up the database. Or if you're using existing database, which may be shared by other devs as well, then yes, you need to clean it up afterwards. Again, which each of these tests is doing anyway in the beginning of it. Hope that answered the question. The next question on slide is, have you used Specflow for UI, API, or integration testing? So I've used Specflow for API and integration testing. Now in this example, you can see it's being used for unit testing as well. For UI testing, I personally haven't. So I use Selenium with NUnit and all that kind of stuff, and BDD5. Haven't used Specflow for that. Again, for UI testing, I'm pretty much using Cypress for the last few years, and I would recommend you exploring Cypress for UI testing. And the last one, from the looks of it, is, have you got much experience with Cucumber? Not much. I think that's the end of the question.
It looks like it is tonight. So yeah, thank you very much for that, Naveen. Yeah, thanks for the demo and everything as well. I'll get this all posted online tomorrow. Any other questions that come through tonight or from the video sharing, I will obviously come back to you and run that. Everyone else, I will share the video with the group. I'll also share the repository from this as well, so everybody can get the code. Any other questions, feel free to reach out. If not, obviously we're back next Thursday again. It's going to be lunchtime, 12 o'clock. So yeah, feel free to reach out with any questions, and we'll catch up and go from there. But thanks again, Naveen, and I'll speak to everyone soon.
Yeah, thank you all, and I hope you found it useful. Thank you.